Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're diving straight into a pretty interesting entry from Rodri's prayer diary. This one's dated April 29th, 2025.
Okay.
And our goal, really, is to unpack Rodri's thoughts on a passage from Numbers, chapter 16, specifically verses 12 through 35.
A very dramatic section of Numbers.
It really is. And Rodri focuses even more tightly on verses 26, 28, and 30. We want to explore this idea of, separating from negative influences. Seems quite relevant.
Definitely. And this diary entry, it gives us a personal lens on it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's Rodri wrestling with this ancient text for their own life.
Exactly. It moves beyond just a dry historical reading. So the source itself is this online prayer diary. And the entry is about Rodri's morning prayer, their meditation on these verses.
Mixing scripture quotes with personal reflection.
Right. So to get what Rodri's saying, we probably need a quick recap of Numbers 16.1235 first. It starts with Moses summoning Dathan and Abiram.
And they just refuse to come. Flat out refuse.
Yeah, and then they launch these accusations.
Yeah, they do. They basically say Moses dragged them out of Egypt. And get this, they call Egypt the land flowing with milk and honey, which is ironic.
Very ironic, considering they were slaves there.
Right. They say he brought them out just to, let them die in the wilderness. And they accuse him of wanting to be a ruler seeking power.
It's a really direct challenge to his leadership and, by extension, to God's plan as Moses presented it.
Absolutely. A bold rejection.
And Rodri really picks up on three key verses in all this. First, 16.26. That's the command. Move away from the tents of these wicked men. Don't touch anything of theirs, or you'll be swept away in their sin.
A stark warning.
Then verse 28, Moses says, by this you will know that the Lord has sent me. It wasn't my idea. He's claiming divine authority.
Setting up a test, essentially.
Exactly. Which leads to verse 30. But if the Lord brings about something totally new, and the earth opens and swallows them, then you will know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt.
Pretty dramatic stuff, the ground opening up.
You can see why he captured Rodri's attention. Rodri immediately points to the sheer disdain in Dathan and Abiram's refusal.
Yeah, that sarcastic comment about Egypt, the milk and honey. Rodri sees that as them twisting reality, twisting their own history.
It really shows their bitterness, doesn't it? It's like they're deliberately misremembering.
Rodri notes that God's plan was actually to get them to the real promised land, Canaan, not leave them in the wilderness.
Right. The wandering was a consequence of their own lack of faith earlier on, not Moses' fault.
But Dathan and Abiram are just pinning it all on Moses. Classic scapegoating.
Yeah, misdirected anger.
And Rodri finds Moses' reaction interesting, too. He gets angry, but Rodri notes it's directed towards God, not just personal revenge.
Asking God not to accept their offerings. That's a big deal.
It is. It's a spiritual rejection. And Moses insists he hasn't wronged them personally.
So he's defending his integrity, but leaving the ultimate judgment to God.
Exactly. Rodri emphasizes that. Moses entrusts it to God.
Then Rodri kind of zooms out a bit, thinking about Korah, too. Even though he wasn't in those specific refusal verses, Korah was stirring up the whole congregation.
Right. He riled everyone up against Moses and Aaron. And Rodri reflects on how God initially wanted to, destroy everyone because the rebellion was so widespread.
Wow.
But Moses and Aaron stepped in. They interceded. Rodri highlights this. They argued the people were, largely ignorant, manipulated by Korah.
Ah, so their intercession led God to narrow the focus.
Yes. That's when God gives the instruction. Okay, separate yourselves, just from the ringleaders, the truly wicked ones.
Which brings us back to verse 26, the command to leave. How does Rodri interpret that word, leave?
For Rodri, it's not just packing up bags. It's a deliberate, decisive turning away, drawing a really clear line.
A boundary.
A strong boundary, separating from anything associated with those defying God and the tents of the wicked. Rodri sees that symbolically.
Not just literal tents.
No. It represents any place, any situation, any gathering where ungodly people or things are found. It's about environments and influences.
So avoid the people, avoid their stuff, avoid their whole sphere of influence, basically.
Oh, yeah. Don't even touch their possessions. Rodri sees that as avoiding anything tainted by their sin to protect yourself spiritually.
Makes sense. Then Rodri looks at verses 28 and 30 again, Moses' declaration and the big event.
The earth swallowing them up.
Right. Moses says, this will prove God sent me. And then this incredible, terrifying thing happens.
For Rodri, this is the ultimate validation. It proves Moses was acting under God's direction, and it confirms just how wrong, how wicked the opposition was.
God's stamp of approval on Moses and judgment on the others. Something totally new that Moses predicted.
That phrase really emphasizes the extraordinary nature of the judgment. This wasn't just a coincidence.
Okay, so that's the biblical analysis. Now, how does Rodri bring this into, well, 2025?
This is where it gets really personal. Rodri sees those wicked tents as very real, contemporary negative influences.
Things that can pull people away from their faith or values today.
Exactly. Rodri seems worried about these influences affecting people in their own spiritual community.
Like history repeating itself, in a way.
Yeah.
People being swayed by the wrong crowd or wrong ideas.
That seems to be the concern. Parallels between the Israelites being misled and modern challenges.
And this interpretation seems to give Rodri a sense of mission.
He does. Inspired by Moses, Rodri feels a kind of responsibility to help others leave these negative influences.
To avoid similar, maybe spiritual, consequences.
Yeah. Yes, and to help them get closer to God. There's a strong emphasis in the diary on discernment, identifying and rejecting things that oppose God.
It's quite an active stance.
Very much so. It's about protecting the community's spiritual well-being.
And Rodri mentioned something specific, right?
Yeah.
About people in their community.
Yeah, there's a specific concern mentioned about some partners, maybe fellow members, in their spiritual practices who seem unstable. Yeah. Rodri suspects they're facing difficulties that are drawing them away, putting them in the, and this is Rodri's phrase, influence range of the wicked tents.
Influence range. That's evocative. And what do these watchers mention?
It's not fully defined, but it sounds like a system within their group. Trusted people who check in, offer support, maybe guidance to those who seem to be struggling.
So Rodri isn't just worrying, they're taking action, asking these watchers to intervene.
Exactly. It shows the interpretation directly fueling action. It's not just theory, it's practice.
And how does Rodri wrap up this entry?
By recommitting, renewing their resolve to pray for these individuals and to work with the watchers.
To help them break free.
Yes, break free from these detrimental influences and reconnect with their faith with God. The scripture seems to have really solidified Rodri's commitment here.
It's a really clear example of someone using a religious text to understand and act within their own community's challenges.
Finding direct guidance and motivation.
Okay, so let's try and pull together the main threads from this deep dive into Rodri's diary.
Sure. Well, first off, there's this strong theme of identifying and, crucially, separating from negative influences. Rodri's wicked tents.
Whatever those might look like in our own lives today, that seems key.
Absolutely. Then there's the idea of consequences for defying what's seen as divine authority or guidance.
And importantly, the role of community, of intercession, of guidance like the watchers in helping people navigate that.
Right. Support and intervention are big parts of Rodri's takeaway.
So thinking about this, maybe the question for you listening is, what could possibly represent those wicked tents in your own life?
Yeah, that's a good question. Are there maybe environments or relationships or even just habits you have that feel like they might be pulling you away from, I don't know, your own values, your goals?
Something worth considering. And maybe one final thought to leave you with is that act of separation, of leaving the tent, always so simple, always black and white.
That's a tricky one.
Or are there maybe complexities, nuances we need to think about when we decide what a wicked tent is for us and how we handle those situations with, well, with both conviction and maybe some understanding or compassion, not just outright judgment?
Yeah, navigating that tension between separation and compassion, that's something to really mull over.